So this is a global overview of artificial intelligence and the way that's being used and adopted in the insights and market research. Big shout out to the sponsors. So this is the second wave of the study. The first wave was in March, April of this year. Now this data was collected July and in this month of August. From a global spread, we've got 756 people across the two waves. One of the most important things to remind you is this is not a rep sample. The survey was conducted in English, and it was conducted with people who are connected with NewMR or are friends of people who are connected with NewMR. So it tends to be a more innovative bunch than the whole industry. So we'll bear that in mind as we go through. Who else is in the sample? The biggest group by far, market research agencies, consultancies, and suppliers. The next largest group, the research buyers, the research users. Then after that, but some way behind again, the suppliers, the research industry, the software companies, the panel companies, people like that. And then we have a smattering of academics, journalists, and people like that in the sample. Broadly, it comes from Europe, USA, and Asia Pacific. That is where 90% of market researchers come from, or rather 90% of market research dollars are spent. In fact, over 50% of all those dollars are spent in USA and Canada. So we've got a reasonable spread over the larger parts of the market. We don't have a good spread over Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. So back in the earlier wave, May time, we asked people, how is your organization using artificial intelligence? And 43% of them said they were using it for live projects. Another 35% said they were piloting and testing it. There was about 20% who hadn't started using it yet. The current wave, which is just finished, those figures have gone up for the people using live projects, and they have gone down. There's about 10 or 11% of the sort of people we can reach with this survey who are not using artificial intelligence in some way, shape, or form in their business. Over 80% of the NewMR sample are using it for live or pilot projects. How are you using AI? So we asked people after they said we're using it, just those people who said they're using it, how are you using it? One of the most common uses, text analysis and processing. Automation of routine tasks, so coding responses, report writing assistance, data processing. Improving research workflows, so questionnaire programming, data quality control, rather like Melanie just mentioned in the previous one, operational optimization, and custom AI tools. So Yasna is an example of a custom AI tool. So those are the sorts of things that we're seeing there. And synthetic data generation. Whilst there is a big debate about it, it's quite clear that a lot of companies are selling it and quite a lot of companies are buying it and using it. When we looked at the difference between wave one and wave two, and there's only a few months difference between them, what we see that the uses are wider. There are more things being done now than they were a few months ago. It's more project focused, it's less experimental, and there is more creation of concepts, creation of content, rather than just the analytical stuff or the optimization techniques. I then looked at the difference between using and piloting. So we've got a bunch of people who said they're piloting it. We've got a bunch of people who said they're using it. The using people, they're looking at live projects. Well, that's pretty obvious. An operational efficiency. It's very specific. So they're using it for conversational data collection. They're using it for visualization. They're using it for data integration. They're integrating it into their workflow. It tends to be low risk and routine tasks. And it's very much tactical, not strategic. When we look at the people who are piloting, they're doing experiment and trial and error. Yeah, obviously. Broad exploration. They're trying to find out where it fits in the system. They're trying to be innovative and develop new ideas. It tends to be in high risk areas. They're learning and adjustments. They can do high risk because it's not for live yet. And it tends to be strategic. How are we going to change the business? Do we need to become more qualitative? Do we need to become less qualitative? So quite a strong difference between what people are doing with, if they're using it for real, and the people who are doing the piloting and the experimentation. Here's a couple of actual quotes that highlight that difference. So amongst the people using it, here's one that highlights the tactical nature. We incorporate AI into several elements of our research process, such as coding open-end responses, automating routine data analysis tasks. This helps us streamline operations and deliver results faster. So it's taking tools, relatively straightforward, putting them in, things that can be checked, making it faster. Looking at from the piloting, here's one of the comments, looking at strategically, our team is experimenting with AI-driven insights to support strategic decision-making. We're currently testing how AI can help identify emerging trends and patterns that might not be immediately visible through traditional analysis. There's an intense debate going on around synthetic data, so we asked a repeat of the question, do you feel that you know what synthetic data is? If we look at wave 1, it was 50%. It's gone up in wave 2. To some extent, it was 28% before. It's gone up. No, it stayed the same. It's 29%. And what we see is there is a drop. The vast majority of people who are in the ecosystem that we reach with this survey do have a feeling that they understand to some extent what synthetic data is. So we asked them to define what they thought synthetic data was, and there was a lot of agreement, which is great. Data that's generated often via AI rather than collected from people. Augmented data, supplementing data to fill gaps is one category, and then totally new data. And when we look at the difference, people seem quite comfortable in general with augmented data, and much higher levels of concern and nervousness around the methods of creating totally new data. What are the positives about synthetic data? Faster, cheaper, fewer ethical issues. So we're not prying into privacy so much. We're not talking about real people who could be put at risk, and that it's good when data is scarce. The negative, authenticity. It's not real people. Reliability, it might be wrong. Biased, it might be wrong in ways that take us in bad directions. So we can see what the positives are. They're broadly agreed. We can see what the negatives are. They're broadly agreed. How important people think the positives are versus the negatives often defines their position on the use of synthetic data, how it should be regulated, how it should be adopted. So we asked people whether they thought it was a good thing or a bad thing. And the wording of the questionnaire changed slightly between wave 1 and wave 2. So let's just look at the wave 2 data. Probably a bad thing, definitely a bad thing. About 1 in 7 people think that synthetic data is a bad thing. We then get a large chunk of people who say it's both good and bad. People who can see those positives and see those negatives. We then get a few functional opinions, neither good nor bad. There are a few other comments around it. Quite a lot of people, 1 in 5 saying it's probably a good thing, 1 in 8 saying it is a good thing. So we've got 35% of people who think it's a good thing. If we look at the key numbers from the previous wave, as I say, the wording around neither good nor bad, both good and bad, was slightly different. But the good and the bad end of the scale was the same. 35% of people last time thought it was a good thing. 27% of people last time thought it was a bad thing. So maybe the negativity has diminished a bit. The positivity has not increased across this few months of 2024. One of the important things, and as I said, the debate we see in places like LinkedIn about synthetic data gets quite heated. Every one of us, me included, need to remember they're in a minority. There is no opinion of synthetic data that is a majority. So each of us may have a very strong opinion, but it behooves us to remember that we are a minority and to address that difference in a respectful way, I think. Then we ask people to think about what's going to happen over the next 2 years in terms of market research and insights. Clearly, the overwhelming agreement is there's going to be widespread adoption. There are going to be major changes. There is going to be increased efficiency. There is going to be a growth in DIY or in democratization, depending on which of those two phrases you use. More and more research is going to be done by people who are not in research agencies. More and more research is going to be done by people who are not in the insights departments of client organizations. This is quite an interesting one. It's the first time I've seen this highlighted in the conversations. Data is going to become more important because AI allows us to work with larger data sets, more information. The data itself becomes more important because we think that it's going to be faster and cheaper to use data. The excuses for not using data become less and less and less. So evidence-based decision-making becomes more important. We're going to see a transformation of research practices. For example, one of the ones that I am fairly sure we'll see is more use of qualitative information, fewer closed questions, as we can start to interpret that open-ended qualitative information better. And picking up on what both Mike and Melanie were saying, and to actually what Tanya was illustrating to point, we're going to see human AI collaboration. We are going to see very effective qualitative and quantitative researchers become more effective because they've got these additional tools to enable them to do things. All of this is going to lead to an evolution of the research industry. We are seeing some very interesting changes in terms of acquisitions, mergers, new players coming into the industry. So positives about the next 2 years from our 700 people: increased speed and efficiency, automation of repetitive tasks, enhanced data analysis, innovation in research methods, all good things, and cost reduction. But what are the negatives? Job losses. This is pretty much a common fear across the industry. Over-reliance on artificial intelligence. Data quality and bias. Will the data get worse? Will we be building all these biases which are in AI into the system, and will that be worse than the biases that the humans currently have? Loss of the human element, including empathy, creativity, and ethics, is a concern, and ethical and privacy issues. So we talked about one aspect where it will increase privacy, but it's so many different ways. AI could also reduce privacy. This is why the European Union has just passed the AI Act, which has got some very strict rules about things like facial coding, interpreting eye tracking, interpreting voice analysis. All of those are going to become more regulated in the European Union and possibly in the rest of the world too. So my 5 key action points coming out of this analysis are: I think you want to be in the 50% using AI for live projects tactically, but I also think you want to be piloting new uses. It's just as important to be thinking strategically about what's going to happen. More things are going to become DIY, so you as an organization need to plan for that, whether you're an agency or whether you are client side. The structure of the insights in the MR industry is changing. You need to plan for that. As an employee, it's likely you are going to need to change companies even more often than you have done over the last 20 years. We may well be seeing new players coming in from right outside the industry. We need to be aware of that. And when you're looking to use AI and AI tools, it has to be about quick wins. You don't want to invest in something and say, this is going to pay back over the next 4 years, because almost nothing that's being used today is going to be in use in 4 years' time. Things are moving too fast. You need a quick payback. You need quick wins. You need to be able to show that it's beneficial right now.